Everybody was very excited about Deion Sanders and the vibe, the excitement that he brought to a historical Black university, Jackson State, in Jackson, Mississippi. They are just as riled up now that he's leaving, heading to Colorado. We'd love to hear your comments tonight, and we're going to discuss that tonight on the Timbuktu Report. I do hope that you will stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us for the Timbuktu Report. I'm Pamela Marshall, my co host for this evening, as is the one who sits in the seat there every evening, Dr. Rick Stevenson, who is a professor of African American history and African American studies at the University of Florida. Thank you, Dr. Stevenson, for being here with us tonight.
It is always a pleasure to be on with you, Pamela.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Dr. Rick Stevenson, while he's a professor, a theologian, he's also an athlete. So we want to hear what he has to say about prime time, Coach Prime, and a response to what people are saying across the community, black and white people, about Deion Sanders leaving an HBCU after he made a commitment to be there to uplift, to speak into the lives of those young men who played football at Jackson State. As I mentioned, Dr. Stevenson is also a theologian. And as we do on every show, if you would, sir, take us to the Lord in prayer.
I'll do it. Lord, thank you so much for one more time, one more day, one more opportunity to share, to examine, to discuss, and to enlighten. We are grateful that you have created this platform to disseminate information and to encourage discussion. So, won't you bless our time? We pray that the Holy Spirit will superintend and supervise all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Dr. Stevenson, when you heard that Deion Sanders brought Jackson State from not prime time, but to prime time, two winning seasons, and that he was going to decide, he had decided to leave. You know, they like to sprinkle little rumors in here and there.
Sure.
So when they started sprinkling the rumors in, I was like, he's gone.
Yeah.
What was your thought?
Well, I think that whenever Black people start making changes that don't fit, people are going to talk about you. I think that being a person of God, a person of faith, you have to always recognize that when God speaks to you, other people may not hear what God is saying. And you have to do what God tells you to do. I'll tell you what it reminds me of. It reminds me of the story of Joseph. Joseph was in conversation with God, and God told him he was going to be a leader, that he was going to, that his brothers and his mother and father would bow down to him. And they couldn't hear it. And they hated him so much that they threw him into a well and sold him into Egypt. And so, one of the things you learn from that text is you can't tell everybody what God says to you, but you also have to understand that when God is speaking to you, God may not be speaking to everyone else. And when God speaks to us, we have to do what God tells us to do and do it with excellence. I'm going to quote Prime on this. He says, just so that when it's your turn to answer your own call, you have enough faith, wisdom, experience to go forward in the excellence ahead of you. No matter who congratulates or spits on you, purpose demands your focus. And I think that he is very clear that this is not just about him, it's about the hand of God that's leading him to make another decision. And oftentimes, when God leads us to make decisions, other people don't get it.
Yeah, my uncle, who pastored a church in Gary, Indiana, said this woman came up to him and told him that God told her that he was her husband. He
And
said,
he was
"Well, he's he wasn't married. He was single at the time."
okay.
He said, "Well, I'm going to wait for God to tell me too."
Right.
So this whole God conversation thing, you can't you can't expect just mass emails to go out. You got to be
Ex-
confident in
right.
what you're saying and what you're talking about. Now, there are those who are saying that his comment was that coaches either get elevated or eliminated. He's
Right.
being criticized for saying that, as if being elevated to go to predominantly white school is an elevation from being at Jackson State and HBCU.
I don't think it has. I don't think that the elevation has to do with race. I think the elevation has to do with presence, with opportunity, and with the ability to demonstrate at another level that black coaches can do the job. I mean, if you think about this, right? There are only 12 black head coaches in the NFL. They make up 9%, right? When it comes to colleges, there's only 14 head coaches. And so out of 130 programs, you only have 14 black people who are able to do the job. No, one of the reasons that we have the Rooney Rule, I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but Art Rooney was the chairman of the Steelers, and he introduced this rule that said that whenever there's a vacancy, you have to at least consider looking at a minority or, underrepresented person. And they put that rule in because there is such a there's such a whitewash at the top of the coaching field. It's not that we can't do the job, we just don't get the opportunity. And many of the owners of these larger colleges and universities, as well as football teams, they're not really looking for black people there or brown people or women. So I think that his idea of elevation is not being elevated from black to white, but being elevated where his exposure is being more reticent.
And there was a lot of conversation early on about Deion going to Jackson State and not taking a salary, and the money that he was investing in the school. And to get this kind of reaction because he's leaving, it feels like it's about him leaving a black school. But
Hmm.
there are people who get upset about coaches leaving any school. I got a cousin who's still mad at Calipari for leaving the University of Memphis. So I think we forget that people take ownership of these guys.
Yeah, yeah,
Our coach, our coach, our coach. I mean, they take ownership. They watch them on the weekends and they really embrace them as family.
yeah,
So I want people to not forget that white people get mad about white coaches who
yeah,
leave.
yeah. But white people have more opportunities than black coaches too.
Yeah, either way, but I'm just talking about the emotion of this
Oh,
thing.
okay, yeah,
Like the people who love the Gators,
yeah,
and whatever coach they love, and whatever coach they want to leave, they want them to leave.
exactly.
So
But I
this
think
whole
it's
sport, it creates this atmosphere of, you know, your hours and you're supposed to stay. But then you add color in it
hmm
with Dion being at Jackson State and saying that black players need to start looking at black universities. You don't always have to go to a white university.
right.
And so now people are saying, wait a minute, but you're going.
Well, but again, I think that one of the reasons that black HBCUs don't get a chance to get the kind of, and I use this in quotes, prime time uh, football TV coverage is because the top players are going to these PWIs, right? But what would happen if I mean, he scored a couple number one draft picks, right? At Jackson State. So what happens if all of these athletes start going to these HBCUs? For instance, 30%, I mean, 70% of the NFL players are African American. Could they had not gone to an HBCU? Sure, they could, but why didn't they? They wouldn't have got the exposure. And so even when you talk about elevation, you're also talking about exposure, right? Will these they have I think there's only been one other time that ESPN has gone to a HBCU to a combine,
Hmm.
right? And why'd they go? Because of Prime. And
Hmm.
so, until the HBCUs are on same par with the PWIs, I think it's important that we recognize that what he did was groundbreaking. And whenever you're a groundbreaker, you're going to get criticized. It's the whole crab in the barrel syndrome. Instead of pushing each other up, we're constantly pulling each other down.
Thank you all that are watching. If you would like and share, because I think this conversation about Deion Sanders and his move from Jackson State to a predominantly white institution also speaks to how much are you willing to do?
Hmm.
While we have all of these expectations on one man, and he did a lot for Jackson State, came out of his pocket.
Right.
How- If you're complaining, what are you doing? And how many times have you contributed to anything?
Do you know there are not as many PWIs closing as there are HBCUs? Why? Because oftentimes when the alum from HBCUs graduate, they don't give back to the school. I've actually had students. I went to an HBCU. I went to Lincoln University. I have a sister who graduated from Lincoln. My son graduated from Lincoln, and my brother graduated from Lincoln, and they're all very successful. And I have students that when I spoke to them about HBCUs, they told me their parents said, "You won't get a good education if you go to an HBCU." So I would say, "Did your parents go to HBCU?" "Oh no, they didn't go to college." So,
But
so
that
they,
but that's yeah, I mean that's how we feel about each other. Yet when there's an opportunity,
right,
like I mean the other thing, Dr. Stevenson, is President Barack Obama, the first African American president. I've heard black people say Obama was in there, but he didn't do nothing for black folks. Well, he showed you the way.
you know what? What they
And so when I look at Dion and I say those because there are other athletes, whether they are the coaches or not, you don't have to be the coach to go to a school and make a huge donation. I don't know
exactly,
if Bill Gates can even catch a ball.
probably not.
At the same time, um, there's a standard, there's a double standard that we hold our folks to and that other people are holding Dion to about what he should or should not do when it
Mm.
comes to the relationship with Jackson State. I I feel it. I feel him. I understand. It would have been better if he could have stayed there,
Hmm.
but we also don't know what kind of pressure he was under to take this job either.
Exactly. And why not go up a little bit higher for a higher pay to open up doors for other athletes? I mean, I think that what people fail to realize too is Deion Sanders was a special kind of ball player. He was just voted by ESPN as the greatest cornerback of all time, right? He
Mhm.
played baseball and football. I mean, this guy was a phenomenal athlete. But not only that, another thing I think that's important that we fail to realize is he is very specific about his faith. And he leans on that and he emphasizes that even in his coaching. And that's another thing that we don't take into context. Into context. I think that some of the backlash is just the devil trying to prevent Dion from doing what God called him to do.
Well, because Dion's faith is so strong, I don't even think Dion's worried about it. Do you?
No, not in the least. Not in the least.
When we see what Dion was able to do, getting there, seeing the condition of the locker rooms, the football field, um, some other things that he worked to change,
Weight room.
the weight room, and the resources came.
Hmm.
What should that say to other HBCUs? Are they not working the same avenues? Are they not pushing as hard? to get better facilities for their players and their students?
I think it's a good question. I think one of the reasons that they can is because they're just underfunded. Some of these football programs, as good as the coaches are and the players are, they're just not getting the same kind of funding. Deion Sanders has a brand, and he could literally go in there and not need the salary. But you get another football coach who comes in who may be skilled and able to raise the team up, but they don't bring the same kind of name recognition. And who wouldn't want Deion Sanders as their coach?
So somebody said, well, he doesn't need the money. Well, nor does the coach at Alabama.
Right.
You want him to nobody would think of having him coach for free.
Exactly.
So, is it not okay for him to be compensated for his skills? And I think what he's doing is on this other level, he's already shown what can happen. There's some good players, former players who can be great coaches for HBCUs. Let's
Hmm.
tap into them.
Hmm.
So, and I think in his news conference, he said there have been 4 African American head coaches that have been fired. He's
Yeah.
the only one that is replacing another African American head coach,
Hmm.
which I think is significant.
Yeah. 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 I think that I saw that I was reading about something about the 4 coaches that were fired, and again, when you bring to the table what Deion Sanders brings, not only the name recognition, but the ability to motivate. He said something that I thought was really interesting when he was talking to the Colorado football team, and he talked about consistency. And one of the things that's important about any success is one, knowing your purpose, understanding what it is God has called you to do, and being consistent. And if he was nothing else, he was consistent. And he even said that one of the reasons he would stay at the college level and not go into the NFL is because there are players in the NFL who are getting paid who don't really want to work hard. But these college kids are hungry. Now, I don't know, I've not been in the NFL or locker room, so I wouldn't know, but he knows. And I think that the idea that he is able to invest into the lives of these young men is kind of like the way I teach my classes. One of the things I tell my students is I'm not teaching you this information just so you can pass my class. I want you to pass life, because one of these days you won't be my student. You could end up being a colleague. You might be the next lawyer in my city. You could be the DA. You could be a school bus driver. And I want to make sure that I've made the kind of investment that you make good decisions once you leave here. And I think that's part of his motivation, that he wants these kids not to just be athletes, but to be people, men of integrity, and people with character, and people with that you can rely on.
Tonight we're talking about Coach Prime, Deion Sanders leaving Jackson State University to go to a predominantly white university in Colorado. What he did with that team and how they played for him is indicative of what these players were capable of. But not only what they did on the football field, he had 95% graduation rate. I
Yep.
wish we were talking about why aren't other coaches getting the same kind of graduation rate from these young men who are playing football, since 75% of college football players are African American. Why are other coaches not getting this kind of graduation rate if Coach Prime can have a winning team and 95% graduation rate? That's
Exactly.
what I would love for the conversation to be about.
That's a great conversation. And I have seen, I've worked in universities where the athletes, people were taking their tests for them, people were writing their papers for them, and all they did was play ball. And I think that it reminds me of a plantation, to be very honest with you.
Mm.
That some of these students are only there just to play. They're not, and there's a reason why they're called student athletes, because the student is supposed to come first. But in some of these circumstances, that is not the case.
I would love to hear what some of you have to say that are watching. Carrie Knox in Jackson, Tennessee, watching. Some of you who are watching, what are your thoughts on Deion Sanders leaving? I did speak to the alumni president for Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee, and she said, "I wish they'd leave him alone." But I would also like to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Dion leaving, and what do you think he can accomplish by the decision that he made? Deion Sanders, as you mentioned, was the goat, is, and he has proven it over and over again. And the response that we're hearing from people who thinks that he's a sellout. What are your thoughts on that? That people are considering him a sellout for leaving Jackson State to go to Colorado.
Me personally, or you asking the audience?
You?
Well, if the people who are calling him a sellout were 8-time Pro Bowlers, played 14 seasons in the NFL, had 53 interceptions, 22 all-time rushing yards every time he caught the ball, then they have the right to call him a sellout. Until they pull up those kinds of stats, they're normally armchair coaches. I don't have a lot of words for you because here's my point. Here's my point. When we begin to challenge other people's decisions about their own lives, we have to be able to put at the table the same level of effort. And I would argue that the very people who are calling him a sellout aren't even trying to do what he's doing.
Well, how about this? John Alexander said he was a sellout. I support Dion. He sold out the stadium every time. That is
Amen.
that's that is the way he was. And also, John, I don't know if you heard that Dion was promised extra money when they did cross a certain number of people coming to games, and that did happen. But Dion didn't get the money that he was promised,
Right.
and so we're and to his credit, he he is moving on gracefully and is not. I haven't seen where he has been publicly bashing the university, but can you believe that the president of Jackson State is hoping that he fails? He tweeted that he hopes that he
Oh,
fails.
that's unconscionable. But that's the crab stuff I'm talking about,
Well,
right?
yeah, and thank you all for watching. I hope that you will like and share. Tanya said, proud, so proud of him. Thank you all very much. And the Brazilian said, where is that? He will continue to empower the youth.
Absolutely.
And I think he will do that.
He will. Because
But
it's in
what an
his
e-
DNA.
what an example for the president of a university to say that he hopes that he fails. I don't know that there's biblical support for that.
Oh, now with theologians on the football field.
What,
It
what,
breaks my heart that we cannot support our own. I mean, you can't, you literally can't say anything bad about what that man did. From the moment he stepped on that campus, he was trying to build a program that was successful. And he brought in 2 years records they never had before. And you're going to, why would you? That doesn't even make sense to me. That's what you call hateration.
well, here's somebody said in some of their criticism that white folks came and got our best, and it's a way of dividing and conquering, and that they saw what he was doing there. And he could have waited to go to the NFL. Why did he have to go to a school that's losing?
He didn't want to go to the NFL. But not only that, watch this. Suppose other universities start looking at black coaches and bringing them into Alabama, Ohio
Mhm.
State, Michigan State, University of Michigan. UCLA because of what Deion. I mean, have you thought about that? Is it possible that he is now laying a seed where we might find more minority coaches at these larger universities? Is that possible?
I think so. Tanya said, I am 55, which is the same age as Dion. So I'm 55 from Atlanta. I have always admired him. And then John Alexander adds, I saw that and it was heartbreaking, some of the things that were being said. So many stated he profited, yeah, profited off the school. How did he profit off the school? Yeah, they were saying that, well, but he didn't,
But didn't the school profit off of him?
yeah, the school did profit off. I should put my glasses on. I'm trying to be cute.
You know, I always wear mine.
Yeah. Well, how did he profit when he was giving and not taking a salary, coaching for a fraction of what Nick Saban? Nick
Right.
Saban probably makes that what he got paid. Nick Saban made that just to get out of the bed.
See? And
And nobody would expect a white coach to go to a white school and not get paid.
oh God, no. No. We're always looking for the hookup.
John Alexander is agreeing with you, Doc. That's exactly what's going to happen. That I guess that he's going to continue to. Sorry, John, I'm not sure what you're amening there.
Yeah, what he's trying to say is that other schools, bigger schools, white universities
Ah,
will start saying, hey, man, maybe we're going to look at some of these black coaches because maybe they can do for us what Deion did for Jackson State and what he might do. Watch this. When Colorado shoots to the top, right, they're going to be knocking his door down.
well,
And here's the other thing. I'm sorry.
no, here's the other thing. Go ahead.
Here's the other thing. You have to understand that when you bring something to the table that other people want, that increases your ability to make the kind of decisions about your life that you want to make about your life, right? You can become more selective. He didn't have to go to Colorado. There's a reason that he went, and he says it was his purpose. He believed that God called him to it. And let me tell you something. Unless you want to be thrown off of a ship in the middle of the ocean, like the guy who didn't want to go to Tarsus, then you need to go where God's calling you. And he's very clear about his faith. He says that this is what God has called him to do. So who are we to tell him not to follow God's leading?
Yeah, well, there's also the people are looking at, you know, here's Deion Sanders. He encouraged black players to go to HBCUs, but now he's leaving. He's leaving, and he's taking his son.
Yep. Quarterback. Yep.
And because of the open portal, it probably won't take him that long to build that team back.
Yep.
Do you think he's left a legacy, an example, so that black players will still give HBCUs a look?
I think so. Because what they will see is if they build the kind of winning record, ESPN and all the other top dogs who make those calls will start coming to those schools as well.
Yeah.
It's
Do,
about spreading the wealth.
do you think Deion Sanders has done something? He's opened even a door that can't be shut now because remember the big deal that was made when we first started getting black quarterbacks?
Yep,
Now it's not uncommon to have a black quarterback. People just want to win.
exactly.
And what the example that he set, and if he's able to do at Colorado what he did at Jackson State, which I believe he will,
Yeah,
people are going to start looking at these black players are responding to these black coaches in a
exactly.
different kind of way.
Exactly. Exactly. Do you? It was Jimmy the Greek who said that black guys really weren't smart enough to play quarterback and all that kind of stuff. He lost his job.
Right.
But do you know that there are a number of leading black quarterbacks in the NFL right now?
Right. It's no big deal anymore.
No,
And
it's
I think for all the criticism that Deion Sanders is getting right now, I think he is going to do in the arena of coaching with black quarterbacks. I see the complexion changing because everybody on the everybody in the stadium, the majority of the people in the stadium do not reflect the majority of the people on the field.
they do not.
And if these players are going to respond to a coach that looks like them and
Yep,
go out there and win, people want to win. At the end of the day, the color is green.
exactly. You got Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, Kyler Murray, Arizona, Jalen Hurts, Philadelphia, Dak Prescott, Dallas. You've got Mahomes in Kansas City. I mean, come on. And they're all winning too. They're
Right,
all
right.
winning quarterbacks.
And I think that they will be looking at facilities even more. John Alexander says facilities are a huge magnet for
Right.
recruiting. Even Florida recognized that, which is why they just upgraded their facilities. JSU has a new facility and a field because of Dion. And people, Dion he didn't take the locker room with him. It's still there.
Still there.
He didn't take the field with him. It's still there. He didn't confiscate the stuff that he left there, that he brought in supporters that helped make the university even look better than it did before. He didn't
Exactly.
take it with him. I think
Exactly.
what he's doing is opening up some doors that will never, ever be shut again. And I hope that HBCUs will be seen in a different light by the networks like ESPN, and
Hmm.
their games will be covered so that these players will get the exposure that they deserve.
I agree. And I think that another problem, especially in our community, is we're too personality driven. We tend not to see the bigger picture. It wasn't all about Dion. Dion was simply the catalyst. Those athletes still had the gifts and talents.
Right.
He didn't give them the gifts and talents. He just showed them how to use them through the optimal procedures, right? He showed them how to play corner. He showed them how to run a defense. He showed them, he taught the coaches how to coach better. So it wasn't. All he did was ignite and nurture the gifts and talents these people had already brought to the team.
And inspired. The Brazilian said, he did say, don't let my confidence offend your insecurities.
Yep, he sure did.
And he is that. He's very confident and he's unapologetically confident. And I think that we need to lift this brother up.
Hmm.
And when negative comments come to your ear, just look at them and say, how much have you contributed to an HBCU or a
Exactly.
high school for that matter?
Right. Or a person. When's the last time you sat down with an athlete? You know what? My students asked me last day of classes was Tuesday, and we do this thing. I have them every weekend. They have to do something that makes them smile, right? Because I'm trying to teach them balance. So their homework assignment every weekend is to do something that makes you smile. Then we come back to class the next week. I ask them, so what did you do? And they tell me, and they say, "What did you do, professor?" So I tell them what I do. And they said, "How do you have time to do all the stuff that you do?" And I said to them, I said, "It's not about the time that I control; it's distractions. And
Mm.
oftentimes, the people in your life are the ones that's distracting you from being able to exercise your time properly." And one of the things that Dion is able to do is help these students not be distracted by all the other riffraff, right?
Yeah.
Focus on what you're called to do. That's why his motto is I believe.
Yes. Yes.
See? Because if you believe that you're led to do something, you don't let those other distractions prevent you from staying focused on your task.
And he has proven to be able to, John Alexander said, preach, preach. Uh, Look, Linda, thank you all for joining us. It's been a wonderful conversation. Sharon Benjamin in New Jersey says, great conversation. Um, and we we want to make sure, even with the Timbuktu report, I hope that you guys will come back here every Thursday at 7 o'clock, because we appreciate Dr. Rick Stevenson for taking kind of time to share with us his insight and what he is doing at the University of Florida with the students that are there, that he's able to touch their lives. And the important thing is for us to help support him in what he's doing and support the Deions of our community with our pockets and our prayers, those two P's, pocket and prayers,
Yeah.
pocket and prayers.
And I come back because you pay me so well.
hmm And there are people standing waiting for you to leave so that they can get this pay. Dr. Stevenson, thank you again, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching us. We really, really appreciate it. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate your support. And share. Let everybody know what an incredible uh, show this is, because Dr. Stevenson brings us such good information every week, and we really appreciate it so much. So, thank you all so much for joining. I hope that you will, if you did not see the beginning of the show, I hope that you will go back and look at the beginning. And I love these people are just commenting tonight. That's real. I moved my son to New Mexico from Georgia, and his grades went through the roof.
Yep.
Ah, less distraction.
I'm telling you, it
Wow.
works. Yeah.
95% graduation rate at Jackson State at HBCU, and we need to hold every other coach accountable for your graduation rate. And what is that? Why is your graduation rate not any higher?
Yes, right. That's
We
right.
need to do that instead of criticizing Dion. Hold these other coaches accountable for their graduation rates being so low.
Yep.
Dr. Stevenson, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Always
And
a pleasure.
everybody, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next Thursday on the Timbuktu Report. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Remember, there is healing.
At the well.
Make it a fantastic moment.